Hello everyone, this is Lynn Palermo from the Armchair Genealogist. Today I'm going to bring you my very first video, and we're going to discuss our family history blog to book project. Today specifically we're going to discuss structuring your blog for the purposes of writing a family history book. And I'm really killing two birds with one stone here, because I'm also going to use mind mapping to help you visually see how to structure your blog. We talked about mind mapping a couple weeks ago, and there is a link at the bottom of this video that you can follow back if you want to read more about mind mapping and how you can use it for your genealogy research and for writing your family history. If you're new to the blog to book project, there's also a link below so you can catch up and see everything that's going on with the blog to book and how we're getting ready to start writing our family history stories. So let's get started with blogging our book and what the structure of our blog is going to look like. Most people out there who are blogging their family history right now are using surnames as their basis for blogging, and our blog to book project isn't really going to be too much different from that. I'm hoping at this point you've given some really thought to the scope of your project, how many surnames you want to cover, the ancestors, and the stories you want to cover. But one word of warning that I want to give you about surnames, and that is, if you're going to cover them in your blog to book project, you really need to think long and hard about how many surnames you're going to cover. If you get too many surnames going on, too many stories, it could get a little bit messy. So if you're new to this, I really highly suggest you stick with one or two surnames. Any more than that, and you might feel a little bit overwhelmed. The next point I want to make about surnames is, when we're structuring our blog, we want to create a separate page on our blog for each surname. So for instance, if I were going to write a family history, and let's say I want to cover both the maternal and paternal lines for my mother, that being the Demerara and the Vinecourt families, and suppose I want to cover each story and then bring them together into a family history book, you could set up a separate page on your blog for each surname. So in this case, my paternal line, the Demerara, for my mother's father, and her mother's line, the Vinecourt family. They would have separate pages on the blog with separate stories going on. And this is one way that you can construct those stories individual of each other, and then when we bring them together in a blog, we can combine them in various manners, and we'll talk more about that later as we move along. So once we've identified what surnames are going to be in our blog, the next thing we want to identify is our main ancestor. And the reason being for this is that we want to really make sure that this main ancestor is going to be the main character of our story. Now, I know what you're saying, there's a lot of ancestors that make up a story, but for the purposes of creating a story that's going to read like a novel, you really need to identify one or two main ancestors. It doesn't have to be a single main ancestor, but one or two main ancestors, and the rest of your ancestors might play more minor roles. So this is where you have to really think long and hard, take a good look at your research, and decide how best it'll be to arrange your story around one particular ancestor. Which ancestor jumps out the most, could carry a story. And we're going to talk more about our main ancestors, the characterizations, as we move forward. But really take a good long look at your family history and decide under each surname who the main character is going to be. The one reason that we want to identify this main character is because we're going to begin to build his story, and we want to arrange his story like any other novel, and that is in a plot format. In order to have our family history read like a novel, you really do have to identify a plot. So moving forward, in our blog to book project, we're going to hope to tell our story in a plot format, so it's going to read like a novel, and that way people are going to be much more interested in reading it, and it's just not going to be a list of of facts and events. Now, how are we going to structure that story into our blog? Well, we're going to identify chapters. Essentially, when anybody writes a story, you have a list of chapters. And these chapters are, in fact, scenes that are linked together, and a series of scenes creates a chapter. That's how it works in the book world. So for the blog world, those scenes equal blog posts. So if we think about a scene in a story, that is essentially going to be a blog post. And then when we put a series of scenes together, we create chapters. We're going to do the same thing. Those blog posts are going to come together and they're going to create the chapters of our books. How are we going to identify those? Well, we're going to identify them by labels and categories. And I say labels or categories because labels is how we'll identify it if you're using a blogger format for your blog. And categories is how you're going to identify your blog posts if you're using WordPress. So every time you write a blog post, whether that's 250, 500, 800 words, it's going to be a scene that you are going to label or categorize. And after doing several blog posts categorized, they will come together to make up the chapters of your book. So the chapters is a very key and important part of our blog to book project. It essentially is your outline, and we'll be giving a lot of thought to that as we move forward. As we move forward, we'll talk about scenes, how to write scenes, and essentially those blog posts. So that's what we're looking at here. This is our blog to book project, a good overview of how to structure your blog. You're going to start with your surnames, and remember, those will be the pages on your blog. From there, you're going to identify your main ancestors, and we're going to identify the plot to our story. And that plot is going to show up in our blog to book in chapters. Those chapters are going to be created through scenes and blog posts, which we're going to label and categorize. This is going to help to keep you organized and on track and focused as you move through your blog to book project. And it's also going to make it so much easier when you go to curate your book at the end of the day. Once you're done writing your blog and you want to bring everything together into a book format, this is going to save you a lot of time because you have done this organizational work ahead of time. I hope you enjoyed this first video. Look for more videos on the way, particularly with the blog to book project. We're going to be discussing next these main ancestors. We're going to really delve deep into the plot structure. We're also going to look at writing our scenes. So stay tuned. There's much more to come. Let me know what you think of this first blog, how I can improve it, and also about mind mapping. Did you enjoy this mind map? And if there are other ways that I can show you mind mapping applications for genealogy research and writing, please drop me a line, leave me a note in comments, and I'd love to show you more of this lovely mind mapping application. Actually, I'm using today iMindMap 5, and this is actually the ultimate package I'm using, not the basic package, just so you know that. But I'm really finding lots of uses for it, so we'll continue further with mind mapping as well. So thanks for stopping by today, and we'll talk later. This is Lynn from the Armchair Genealogist.